A little while ago, I made a video analyzing the attach rates of Mario games across different Nintendo platforms. Basically, how well did Mario games do relative to the platform they launched on? And I made a completely accidental realization I was not expecting, which is that Mario games did horribly on the GBA. Like, so bad that it actually threw my data off a little bit, and I had to keep correcting and checking different versions of the data. And to be even more precise, I really focused it on the Mario Advance games, as well as Mario vs. Donkey Kong, because that was a unique 2D platformer to that system, and I also just really like that game. In that video, we discovered that Mario games on the GBA all had less than a 10% attach rate, meaning that less than 10% of GBA owners owned that particular Mario game. And since it was a discovery that I just made in the moment, I didn't have time in that video to really dive in and figure out why that was. So that's what I did for this video. And this time, I already did all the research ahead of time, so I have a pretty good idea. I now know why Mario games underperformed on the GBA. I have 5 reasons total, and we're going to go in order from least compelling but still worth mentioning to what I think is the biggest, most compelling reason to explain why Mario games did poorly on the GBA. But first, it's important to note that I'm just going to focus in on the platformer games for this video. No RPGs, no kart racers, just keep things simple. Reason number 1, our least compelling reason for why Mario didn't perform as well on the GBA is just, I want to mention that the console was so completely dominated by Pokemon. You can look at pretty much any video game console, and the number of like super high attach rate heavy hitters that it feels like everyone owns is actually a relatively small number of games, which totally makes sense when you look at a big picture. The vast majority of people that own and play video games are not super hardcore like us, keeping track of everything, playing tons of stuff. They buy a few games a year. Games aren't cheap, and they're probably buying the biggest games that everyone's talking about because that's what's on their radar. Basically, people that have the stack. You know, people where you walk into their apartment and it's not on a shelf or organized or in a drawer. They just have like the short stack of games, probably just sitting on a table. You walk in, they're like, "Hey, man, what do you want to play? I got Mortal Kombat, I got Madden. What do you want to play?" For example, on the current Switch 2, these high-profile, everyone has them games would be your Mario Kart World, your Donkey Kong Bonanzas, and on the GBA, it was Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. The fact that I stumbled on that is really concerning to me, actually. No one who makes Smash videos on the internet should stumble on any Pokemon generation. As long as Pokemon was dominating, that leaves less market share for Mario to dominate, as he so often is able to. And that actually ties in to the second, slightly more compelling point, which is that in the high-profile 2D platformer genre, the GBA actually had a lot of competition for Mario, even within his own series. The Wario Land games were doing pretty solid on GBA. Alongside that, Sonic had a great string of games on the GBA, and even just Mario himself was heavily competing with himself. And we're talking about 5 2D platformers on one system. Maybe if there was only one Mario Advance game, then instead of sales being spread across 5 different 2D platformers, they would have converged all around that one singular game, and its sales might have looked a little more normal. But more important than any kind of competition from Pokemon or other platformers, point number 3, this is something I never actually realized and internalized until I started looking into this video. The Game Boy Advance was just not on store shelves for very long. Nintendo games across the board are supposed to have long legs. They just keep selling forever and ever for as long as the console's alive. That's why they never go on sale. They don't have to. They're going to keep selling anyway. If your console is only on shelves for 3.5 years, and of course, let's not forget, most of these Mario games did not come out in that initial launch window, so they had even less time on shelves. They really didn't have any time at all to take advantage of those legs that Nintendo titles are supposed to have. Those consecutive Christmases where grandma just returns to the Best Buy and just picks up a new Mario game every time. If the GBA's around for 5 years and grandma picks a new Mario game every Christmas, you got all 5 Mario 2D platformers. That wasn't possible on the Game Boy Advance. This is the first point that I think truly makes a noticeable dent in the sales of these games. But we still have 2 more to go that I think are even more important. The 4th point is that this console did not have a big Nintendo EAD produced Mario game. I think it might be the only major Nintendo console that didn't get a Nintendo EAD Mario game. For those of you who don't know, Nintendo is not just one development studio. They have tons of development studios, all making different games. Nintendo EAD is arguably the biggest, arguably the top dog, the one that makes pretty much every major Mario game that you can think of, among other titles. Actually, I'd forgotten that recently Nintendo EAD merged with Nintendo EPD, so now they're just all under the Nintendo EPD banner. EAD doesn't exist anymore. But it's the same team making the games, so when I say EAD in this video, it's still the same team, same people, same principle. They're just now under the banner of EPD. The point's still the same, just the letters are different now. And generally speaking, these Nintendo EAD games are pretty successful, they're pretty high profile, they exist very prominently in the cultural zeitgeist. This is because generally they are very good, of course, but honestly more relevant to our current topic is because these are high-profile releases from Nintendo's biggest studio, they push them and market them like they are a big deal. Perfect recent example, does Donkey Kong Bonanza just feel like it was a bigger deal than past new Donkey Kong games? Like Nintendo was pushing it harder, like culture attached to it more? That is in part because it is a good, well-received game, but all modern Donkey Kong games were very well received. But unlike games like Retro Studios' Donkey Kong Country games, Donkey Kong Bonanza was a Nintendo EAD game, and it got that Nintendo EAD push. Because none of the Mario games on the Game Boy Advance were these super high-profile EAD releases, they didn't get that push, they didn't get that cultural zeitgeist around them. Nintendo didn't treat the games like event releases that everyone needs to pay attention to, so culture didn't attach to them and didn't treat them like they mattered that much. So already we have 4 different reasons that explain why, from different angles, it could be reasonable to see why these Mario games did not perform to the level that others did. But there was something about this set of games that just really stuck with me, and I really wanted to get a specific answer to. Some of you might have been yelling at your screen the entire time. Most of these games are ports. Of course, they're gonna sell worse when they're all ports. And that's a very compelling reason. But the Switch happened. The Switch saw ports of New Super Mario Bros. U, Super Mario 3D World, and they did incredibly well. Being a port of an old game can't be the problem inherently because we see success cases for it all the time. But then I thought about it for a little more, and I think I realized the key reason that, when combined with the others we've talked about, paints the full picture for why Mario games on the Game Boy Advance did not sell to the level of other platforms. And that is because, yes, they are ports, but they are ports of extremely popular games from extremely popular hardware. Some of them were even made available on 2 different pieces of extremely popular hardware. Odds are a lot of GBA owners had ways to experience Mario World, Mario 3, Yoshi's Island, without needing to purchase it for their GBA. Whereas when you look at the Switch ports, 3D World, New Super Mario Bros. U, those came from extremely unpopular hardware, and they moved to very popular hardware, and they were just good games, so once they got onto popular hardware, they had their chance to shine. And this is even backed up in the Switch catalog when you compare how successful Mario 3D World and Mario U were to ports like the Galaxy Collection and 3D All-Stars, which were successful, not flops at all, but noticeably less successful than what was achieved with those other ports. So on the one hand, you have this robust, frankly impressive collection of classic Mario titles remade for the Game Boy Advance to buy that a lot of people have already played and wasn't the most exciting because they had Pokemon to get and a bunch of other cool platformers were coming out. But then at the same time, this volume of titles, this kind of clutter of Mario you have to pick from, all are mainline games, all look like real Mario games, create competition with each other, and take shine away from the original new Mario game, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, which, let's be honest, has kind of spin-off energy to it, while the others do not. And while these games are just cannibalizing each other, nerfing everyone's sales in the process, the hardware they all live on ends up just having an extremely short run, not giving anyone time to grow and mature into a victor on the platform, at least in the 2D Mario space. If you look at the top-selling GBA games, Mario games are still relatively high up, just like they should be. Just none of them were given the chance, or the time, or the means to become a superstar title, especially when you consider that the developers themselves were not pushing them to be superstar titles like we might usually expect out of Mario games. Mario games did not flop on the GBA because there was some problem or conspiracy or issue or controversy. It was all just a matter of circumstance, and frankly, circumstance that Nintendo was aware of and was okay with. Bad numbers alone do not always have to indicate a flop. There is so much context and nuance behind every situation in this industry that one metric alone will never give you the full story. Although, not to say, like, Mario games on GBA actually did super good or anything, they did do pretty bad.